Welcome back to Voices of Santa Barbara. I'm your host for the day, Mark McIntyre. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening, everyone on the Central Coast. Today, we have a very special guest, so we're going to dive right into our guest interview. His name is James Fenkner, and James attended the University of Belfast, Sacramento State before that, Tufts University, and he holds economics degrees. He began his career as a Fidelity management executive in Boston, and then he left for the former Soviet Union to teach economics for the George Soros Foundation in 1993. Now, this makes him a very interesting guest because over the years, he has certainly evolved his views from the views of the George Soros information. Anyway, so I want to welcome James Fenkner. He's also the co-founder, along with many illustrious Santa Barbara folks, of Fair Education Santa Barbara. And we're going to be talking about the impact of recent recall elections, the failed recall of Newsom. How does that impact on Santa Barbara education? Welcome, James Fenkner. Good to see you again, Jim.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Mark. I'm excited about our talk.
Well, a lot has been going on, so let's just sort of dive right into it. What has been the reaction to fair education? Well, first of all, let's start with what is fair education? For those who have been hiding under a rock or living on the far side of Mars, let's just review. What is Fair Education Santa Barbara? When did it start? Why are you one of the co-founders? And what are you all up to? Let's just throw it out to you.
Okay. Let's see. We began about 2018 as a group of parents and kind of concerned citizens. Actually, I remember the date. I had went to a school board meeting to complain about the lack of an intercom system at Dos Pueblos. Mm-hmm. They had a bond issue, which should have paid for an intercom system, but still they didn't. And so one Tuesday, I went to the school board meeting, and I couldn't get a ticket. I couldn't get a speaking slot because it was all taken up by this group talking about how wonderful they were and how they were necessary in the district. And so I sat down next to Sheridan Rosenberg, and she said, "You're not going to believe what's going on here." And so I sat and listened to these really radical students talking about the overthrow of America and how everything is bigoted and racist, and that this group, Just Communities, is really the only salvation. And so Sheridan was there to ask for the curriculum that Just Communities was providing. And we were paying a really pretty penny for this. Taxpayers were paying, I think at the time, it was over $1 million for this curriculum that was being used to teach, quote unquote, teachers and students, but they wouldn't give us the curriculum. And that was really the spark for me. I believe that parents should be able to see what their students are being taught. So we decided, Sheridan and I, to kind of get involved, and within a couple other illustrious members. I don't know if I'm able to name them all on this show.
Yes,
but Mark McIntyre was there at the very beginning, and I appreciate that very much, as well as Greg Gandrid and a few others had come in to help form this organization, which was really kind of a parental rights group, a group that wanted to ensure that all children, no matter their background, were getting an excellent education, and that we were not using our education system to indoctrinate kids. Yeah. And so the date that we actually got together on that meeting with Sheridan, I remember it as October 9th, 2018.
Yes.
And the reason it's so memorable is if you Google Santa Barbara Mission and graffiti, you will find that the next day, a group of people who were talking about all the things bad in America had decided to misspell genocide in red ink on red paint on the mission. So I don't know that these events are related, but it's very it makes a lot of sense, because what we found is that not only are the kids not being are they being radicalized, but they're not being properly educated. I mean, if you're going to use graffiti, spell the words right.
You know, one of the interesting things, James, that you told me in prior conversations is that one of the reasons why you and your family moved to Santa Barbara was because you believed at that time that Santa Barbara schools were educating their students in the basics of reading, writing, mathematics, and civics, and all the things that you and I were brought up with. And so what you're describing to me now is that there's been a tremendous shift in your experience as a parent when you arrived at Santa Barbara, and around the time that you founded and co-founded Fair Education Santa Barbara, you noticed there was a decline in the actual ability of Santa Barbara schools to educate students, let alone indoctrinate them, but they were not giving due value for the tax dollars that we were spending for this. So is this one of the main reasons why you decided to co-found Fair Education?
You know, it is, I think, as giving you just a little bit more background. I was in Russia for 15 years before moving with my daughters and my wife here to Santa Barbara. And one of the reasons that we chose Santa Barbara, we did a lot of research, at least, that we could do online. And the schools that we were seeing test scores from 2000, 2005, they looked great. And one of the things that we wanted, I wanted to ensure that my daughters grew up with what I would call good American values. These are the real values of inclusivity, the real values of respecting diversity of opinions, the real values of hard work and responsibility. Those are the ones that I always thought were the American values, and we wanted to do so in a school district that was effective. So when we moved here, we were kind of using old data. And we really didn't understand what was going on in the district until it rubbed up against us. And we had a couple of instances. One with my eldest daughter Anastasia, who you've met, where she was being chastised by a teacher for getting a job at a fast food company that he thought was not morally justified, and so he was disparaging her for getting a job.
And this chastisement was in front of other students in class, and it was repeated by another teacher in another class, if I recall the incidents correctly.
You have got a great memory, Mark. You've got a great memory. That is correct. She told me that she had this interaction with the teacher in front of the entire class. I originally told her, look, if he's a good teacher, he'll probably the next day probably apologize, because we make mistakes. People make mistakes. Sometimes things are misspoken in the heat of a discussion, and so I sent her off to school the next day with that hope that the teacher would make amends. And what happened? We realized it was much worse. This teacher had reiterated the story from his narrative point of view to other students in other classes, basically just disparaging her, which is a complete, as you know, as a professor, complete misuse of power.
That should never, ever, ever happen. In my 23 years, actually more than that, 30 years of teaching in a college classroom, I have never heard of any professor, any teacher disparaging a student for taking a job at a place where the teacher perceived to be something that he didn't like or she didn't like. Mm-hmm. Completely a violation of the academic freedom of the student and the First Amendment of the student, not the.
That's correct.
So, We've got about a minute and a half here left in our first segment. Here we are on KZSB AM 1290, the news and talk radio show of the entire Central Coast. My guest today is Mr. James Fenkner, and he's the co-founder of an organization called Fair Education Santa Barbara, and we'll be talking about some other issues now that we understand what fair education is. We now see from what James is talking about that he arrived here with his family 15 years prior to taking residence, and he was working with data that said the Santa Barbara schools were just great. They were just fantastic. So why not move there? This is a wonderful place. He gets here and he finds out that they're not even teaching. They're in the business of indoctrinating students in some sort of nonsensical, half-baked Marxist notions, which we'll talk about later in the broadcast. So I think we'll probably take our first break now. I am Mark McIntyre. This is KZSB AM 1290. We'll be right back. Stay with us. And we're back here at Santa Barbara, KZSB AM 1290. I'm your host, Mark McIntyre, and this is Voices of Santa Barbara, all up and down the Central Coast. My guest today is Mr. James Fenkner, and he is one of the co-founders of an illustrious group of individuals, excluding myself from that, by the way, called Fair Education Santa Barbara. And what we're discussing today, folks, for the entire broadcast is the impact of the change in the educational standards here in Santa Barbara. Not only Santa Barbara City, but all of the cities, Goleta, Carpinteria, all up and down the coast, actually. The impact that critical race theory, half-baked Marxism has had on the decline of education. So welcome back, James. And in this second segment, we're going to be talking about what has been the growth pattern of Fair Education Santa Barbara. I understand you've been able to increase the attendance of members of Fair Education Santa Barbara at school board meetings. Why don't you tell our audience exactly how this has evolved?
Yes. So when we first attended the school board meetings, it was myself, Sheridan Rosenberg, maybe another parent, and then just empty chairs. When this is after that, the Just Communities horde had come. No one was really interested in following this. But what we found in terms of the documents of Just Communities, they had a matrix of oppression. That is that you are nothing more than your color, your gender, your any type of issue is really divided down between victims and oppressors. It is, as you mentioned, a very Marxist view, and so we joined up with Eric Early, who's a very accomplished lawyer down in Los Angeles, to sue first for the documents, and then on the basis of these documents, to stop the school district from basically teaching race essentialism and the victim oppressor narrative in all of their teachings. And this has been quite a journey. We're in fact still in this journey. After the lawsuit was filed in federal court, it was then knocked down to state court because of a contract issue. And we're still in appeals process on the very contract issue, which in simple terms is that the school board was bucketing money to their friends. They weren't putting these contracts out to public bidding. They were taking essentially money that should go to the students and taking it out and putting it in very radicalized nonprofits. So that was also, this whole process for me has been quite a journey. And in fact, what we've discovered is that we were the first group that has sued on critical race theory in the United States for K through 12s. This is basically blown up. We didn't realize what this issue was with critical race theory until it was better defined in academia. But there's now scores of lawsuits all over the states on this very issue, and we've helped contribute to a number of these groups. There's a national group out of New York called FAIR, the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism. There's groups called No Left Turn in education. They've got over 50,000 members. There's a whole bunch of groups that have basically come up after this, after our initial lawsuit, to essentially do the same thing, to protect students and the interests of parents in schools.
Yeah, essentially, fair education really cracked the walnut open so that we could see inside. And the more the investigation pursued, the more we found out that the local Marxist group is called something very, very cute, Just Communities Santa Barbara. You know, the left is very, very good at euphemisms. Euphemisms, of course, being making something ugly sound really nice. And what is better in Santa Barbara than being nice? It's the one political party that we all seem to belong to. And what we found out was that all over the globe, not just in America, not just on the Central Coast, but all over the globe, funded by George Soros, whom you were affiliated with at one time, all over the globe, the Marxists have been very clever at localizing the title of their subversive groups in taking over the curriculum of the local school boards. They were very smart. They've been at this for 50 years. And this is why there's such a difficulty in combating them. They've elected everybody to the school boards that they ever wanted. They've elected others to the boards of trustees of the colleges, the universities, and even the private schools. They have infiltrated the court system. They've infiltrated the military, and certainly they have taken over the media. So this is why you were probably slow in getting started with fair education, because it's a pretty steep climb, going up against all of that Marxism.
Yes, it's actually very interesting. You mentioned this, how the depth of the other side, how they've essentially enacted this. First, what they've done with this cute group you mentioned, Just Communities, is they would teach the teachers, and so we wouldn't find out about it as parents initially, because once the teachers are then radicalized, they can radicalize their classrooms. You didn't really understand.
They first of all did the administration. I don't mean to interrupt, but I think
yes, you're right. These were the folks that had to sign off.
Right. My first brush with Just Communities Santa Barbara was in 2016, while I was still teaching at Santa Barbara City College. Then President Lori Gaskin turned the entire faculty orientation over to, guess who? Just Communities Santa Barbara. So the faculty and the administration were indoctrinated into this. We could not ask any questions. We were not giving any documents. We couldn't raise our hand. And you were a pariah if you didn't applaud this. The whole day, the entire day, at taxpayer expense, was spent to subvert and indoctrinate the administration, the faculty, so that they could then go and subvert and indoctrinate the students.
That is correct. That is exactly the way it's been done. In fact, I look at it from the Soviet history, and they're more effective than what the Soviets did in terms of their indoctrination. And one of the things I think to keep in mind is that when it's talking about this, and is that we find a lot of these folks on the school boards, they see themselves as activists, not educators, right? They want to disrupt a system. They don't want to necessarily improve it. If you look at test scores, California right now is around, I believe it's 47th in the U.S. on a math English ranking. 47th. That's equivalent to Alabama. So people here will make fun of Alabama, but we still educate kids at a level that they could get in. They can get there, and it's kind of ridiculous that we have been focusing our education system on activism, because there's real needs that these kids have. We want to make sure that they can compete in a global economy, that they have the skills to have confidence in themselves, and to become productive members of society.
Well, you're right. You're absolutely.
That's kind of what the
Yeah, we're going to take a break here to hear from our sponsors. So sorry to interrupt you, but we'll be back and we'll be talking in our next segment about the effect of the failed recall election here of Governor Newsom. How is that going to affect the spending, the budgeting, the staffing, the administration, the faculty for the education here in Santa Barbara on the Central Coast? So stay with us. I am Mark McIntyre, your host for Voices of Santa Barbara, AM 1290. We'll be right back.